Live on the Plutopia News Network, this is the Plutopia Happy Hour. Our guest this evening is Glenn Smith, who I'm certain is going to tell us that everything is just fine down at the Austin State Capitol. Maybe not, maybe not. But the not ready for cable news players are here. I see Maggie Duvall joining us. Susie Sheeler is here. John Lubkowski is here, and Susie is going to be our designated driver for this evening.
Okay, I will do my best as a driver. I haven't driven in years and years, but I'll do my best. We're here tonight with Glenn Smith, a guy I'm very happy to call a friend. He is the director and senior strategist for Progress Texas. He is also a contributor to Austin American Statesman and the Texas Tribune and local news. Is it CBS, KXAN?
Believe it or not, it's Fox 7 that I'm on occasionally.
Lord, Fox 7, CNN, and of course, Rag Radio. And also, I like to always throw this in because it's my favorite thing. He was the campaign manager of the 1990 winning gubernatorial campaign of Governor Ann Richards. So, Glenn, we were first of all, you also, I think, got to use your first mail-in ballot just recently. Is that right?
I did this first time, right? Because I was of an age where the Republicans couldn't attack me for voting by mail.
And was that solicited or unsolicited?
Unsolicited. In my case, you mean? No,
Yeah.
I just applied for. I just knew I could and applied for the ballot by mail. It came to me. I sent it back in the primary and the general election, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So do you think you'll get to do that again?
I'm almost certain that I will. Although, if the Republican shenanigans continue to be what they are about messing with voting and with polling places, it may be necessary to go out to the polling place just to see what's going on.
Right.
We can
With
talk
like
about
poll
that in a little bit.
watchers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
There
we
have
did
been.
something like that one time, didn't we, Glenn?
Yeah, we did way back in the
Yeah.
day.
I remember that.
Those are the days of the Pony Express and paper ballots, if I recall.
Yeah.
Oh, those were good days. I mean, not quite. I had a paper ballot once though. When did they stop doing that?
Stop doing.
Like, right, paper ballots. Was it like right after the
Oh,
hanging Chad thing?
yeah. Well, actually, it was. Actually, it was in the here was in. In fact, I was involved in another campaign in 2002 when they brought me these machines that turned out to be the kind of machines we vote on today, and I had no idea they were coming. They passed that America Votes Act, I think, in 2001 after 2000, and this was part of it to move to this kind of electronic voting. But I looked at these machines and I even thought, well, golly, there's no paper trail. Uh, I was a little bit worried about them even their first year of use. And turns out maybe with reason. And I do notice one thing pending in the legislature would actually create uh, checkable paper trail of ballots that have been cast. They don't want to call them receipts, but I actually think that is one good thing in a barn full of terrible things in these voting bills in the Texas legislature.
Well, out
Well,
here in Bastrop County, last time I voted in person, it wasn't this past election, but the one before, it was all paper ballots, and it always has been. I think we're a little technologically retarded here in Bastrop.
well, so what does that mean? I mean, I remember not this last time. In fact, the last two times I was a little bit shocked, 2018 and 2020, that I wasn't given a receipt. Usually, when I would put a ballot in, I would get a little slip of paper, and I never really knew what that was for. I just assumed it was some sort of thing that I could call and say, "Hey, this is my barcode number. Tell me what if you have my vote."
Um, well, you can. Well, there's two things. One of the reasons it didn't happen, I just think it was a lack of force. It was just human confusion and error from the very beginning of the use of these machines. Really, I don't think there was much design or purpose into it by excluding traceable paper records of the votes. Honestly, don't. I think they didn't think about it. I know that sounds incredible, but so then
No.
county election administrators here and around the country went and purchased by contract these really expensive voting machines, and then they had no way of converting them over these. And then different election officers in different jurisdictions saw things differently, and it became a political issue. And so, it's almost 20 years later that they're actually coming around to fixing that little part of the voting process.
Yeah, back in the mid 2000s, when I was still president of EFF Austin, we worked with a guy named Dan Wallach from Rice University, who was he was actually studying the voting machines that were starting to roll out, and we were pushing really hard for more transparency about how those machines were built. And really, we kind of wanted them to have open source technology versus these proprietary technologies that they use. And of course, we didn't get much traction with that.
No, it didn't. But anyway, that's one little thing we can, hope works a little bit better in the next election.
Well, oh, okay, so we're also limiting, we're taking away. I saw Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. He's not the governor, but he does have more power than the governor. I saw him talking about limiting each county to just one box.
Oh,
How does
yeah.
that work in Harris County?
Well, this is part of a really big and unsettling story. If you've seen the development of Democratic power over the last many years, they've really come back in the major urban areas of Texas. In fact, with the exception of Tarrant County, Fort Worth, and they're getting closer in Fort Worth, they really control the county and city governments in San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Austin, of course, El Paso. And so the Republicans see that if they're going to maintain their statewide power, they're going to have to limit the voting somehow in these urban areas and limit the power of elected officials in those areas. So they don't want officials in either the county commissioners or mayors to be able to set local laws, like we went through here with the plastic bag law and the ride sharing laws, and in Tarrant County, the ban on fracking within the city limits of Fort Worth. They don't want their will at the state level to be overturned by local officials. And by the same token, they don't want local voters in the urban areas to be able to deny them statewide power, right? So here comes these extreme restrictions on voting, and not really restrictions is a bad frame. They're actually Jim Crow era like efforts to suppress the votes of minority voters. It's very overt. It's very obvious. There's really no denying it. They don't much care because their constituents, their base is kind of for it, right? And that's the bulk of the provisions in the two main bills in the legislature. The Senate Bill 7 in the Senate, which has passed the Senate and is pending in a House committee, and House Bill 6, which has passed the House committee and is headed to the floor of the Senate probably in 2 weeks.
And so, and those two bills, at least, I guess it's both bills that kind of are all encompassing, especially SB 7 that covers a whole lot of, that houses most of the restrictions. I mean, I know there are other bills that target things, but it seems like that's sort of the umbrella bill.
Yes,
Have
it
I
is.
got that right? Okay.
No, you do have that right. And it's interesting to listen to their justifications. I'll give you one of their justifications, which the Senator Brian Hughes got caught up on, and CNN called him out on it. Was there's through all their looking over the years, all their investigating, they've only ever found 16 cases of quote unquote fraud. And those cases involve somebody like me or you getting a number wrong in our address or using the address we just moved from, right? And you can hardly call that fraud. They were mistakes, to tell you the truth. But but they are making the application process harder for mail ballots. But besides that, the rest of the reforms have nothing to do with mistaken addresses on vote by mail applications. All of them have to do with making it more difficult to vote, period. Limiting the number of polling places in the urban areas, for instance. So basically, they don't get any more polling places than a rural area, which is incredible. Those innovations that Harris County achieved this time with drive-through voting, 24-hour voting one day, extended voting hours on several days in the early voting period, those are out under these bills, under the Senate bill. I mean, it's all aimed at diminishing the number of votes out of urban areas and really in statewide races. And it's Jim Crow all over again. It's disenfranchising people of color, and they're doing it at their will. I mean, it's a sad thing to watch.
The ability to record people voting or people assisting voters sounds like a really scary idea, because that's going to be pushed forward to where they're going to be recording everybody, and potential for misuse of those videos is pretty scary.
Scoop, let me give you an update from just today. As y'all may have known, the permit-free gun carry bill was on the floor of the House today. And basically it got the license to carry provisions for all the safety measures in the current Texas gun laws, and allows people to carry without a permit. In the course of that debate, I can't remember who did it. Diego Bernal from San Antonio had an amendment, and then Rafael Anchia followed with a similar amendment, because the bill prohibited quote unquote street gangs from being able to carry without permits.
Wait.
Excuse me, how do you figure that out?
Oh my God.
Wait a minute, I'm not done. They explained that police departments keep lists of the gangs and the gang members, and so that's all that needed to be known. So if you're a gang member and you're with a gun without a permit and you're arrested, you're breaking the law, the new law.
So if your dog pooped on the police chief's front lawn and you got on the list, then you
better
can't
look out.
carry.
But these amendments would have extended that prohibition to domestic terrorists, insurrectionists, white nationalists, Proud Boys, Boogaloo Boys, etc. And the Republicans voted those amendments, 2 of them, down, meaning they aggressively voted to arm the kind of people that attacked the Capitol on January 6th, while prohibiting, and unfortunately by street gangs, we all know they meant youth of color in the urban areas, right? And those insurrectionists and white supremacists and domestic terrorists are the people they think are going to be their poll watchers on the new election laws.
Oh my God.
So they're protecting their rights to carry guns to the polling places. And I have one more thing to add to this, because it's just incredible. Those laws, pending voting laws, make it a crime for a local polling official to interfere with a poll watcher in any way. You can't challenge them. You break the law if you say to a poll watcher, get out of his face or her face.
God.
Right? So today's law requires someone who does, and by the way, guns in polling places are already against the law, but this new law would seem to require an election official from actually verbally telling a poll watcher, you can't come in here with a gun. When he does that, he's violating the Republicans' new election law. So that's how far they're going. I hope that wasn't too complicated, but I was outraged by it this afternoon.
On that constitutional carry thing, they might be okay with an amendment that prohibits Democrats from carrying guns.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Don't say it too loud. They will try.
Don't give many hints.
Oh my God. For a minute, I was going all separate but equal, but it's like not even. I mean, you're separate and totally, it's 5-on-1 kind of a thing. They get guns and
right.
The gang members don't. I mean,
what are the chances, Glenn, that these bills could stand up to a to a challenging court?
Well, that's on the, that's a really good question on the gun bill. There's several different, like constitutional provisions that they could be challenged under. You just mentioned one, Susie. One is equal protection. Who's clearly, if they're going to let some people carry and other people not carry, et cetera, all those things could matter. It's a little unclear to me um, how you would challenge the state law. It would take a long time to get there. However, no matter how good you'd have to probably go through the state courts first, and they're not going to help us much. The election law is a different story, but I'm just going to say this: we need to pass the federal election reform bill, House Bill 1, House Resolution Run. We're going to have to. We're in the Confederacy again.
Yeah.
We're in pre-integrated South. We're back to the Jim Crow era. Segregation, or even sort of a quasi-apartheid, is coming. Some places it's already here, and it's going to take the intervention of the federal government on voting rights and other issues if we're going to restore something like equality in Texas and across the South.
Well, you say, Jim Crow's coming back, but their parts of Texas where it never left.
Yeah, that's very true. Don't disagree with that, I'm afraid to say.
Well, what about Attorney General Paxton? I mean, he's supposed to be, defending the Texas Constitution and Texans. Why he files a lot of lawsuits? How come he's not going against some of these laws?
These are the kind of laws he wants, while he's, by the way, running from his own federal investigation and criminal prosecution under state law, where he's been indicted for a felony. He may spend most of his time worrying and fretting about those things and making up excuses to file suit against Democrats. He's pretty much the worst attorney general in my lifetime, at least.
Yeah, and we've had some doozies in the state.
Excuse me, I heard two questions at once.
I just asked how long it was ago since he was actually busted in the first place. I mean, it's been years. He keeps putting off the trial, doesn't he?
I think it was 2013, I think.
That's forever.
Well, if you have,
I have like a 1 degree of separation thing with Ken Paxton because I used to live in Slackerville in South Austin, and Nate Paul bought Slackerville, and Nate Paul's a good friend of Ken Paxton, if you've been following the news recently. Yeah. Lots of shenanigans.
Okay, so I read something really weird that's upsetting to me personally. What happens to the people who have disabilities? I mean, like, how are they supposed to vote if they can't actually leave their homes? Because what I've seen is that you have to have a document that specifically states your disability in order to get a mail-in ballot.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because Senator Zaffarini, by the way, whose district comes up towards Bastrop, Scoop, you might even be in her district.
Yeah, I believe so.
She had a success on that score, and she got that, we call it the doctor's note provision. It's in common sense way in current law is, if I show up at a polling place or make an application for a mail ballot, there's no investigation about whether I'm sick in some way that requires it. It's kind of obvious if you think about it. If you went to the polls where they used to allow people to come out to the car, and no poll worker is going to like do some kind of diagnosis to see if you really can't walk or whatever. It just doesn't happen, right? So the doctor's note provision that was in SB 7 would have, as you said, if I filed an application for a mail ballot claiming a threat to my health, the voting in person, I would have to have had a doctor's note, or I think a Veterans Administration note, or a Social Security disability. There's three things. But she got that taken out of the bill before it left the Senate.
No kidding. Oh, that's fantastic.
It was not, I think it was not workable in the first place. And there was probably federal HIPAA privacy violations. If I had to,
Okay. Yeah,
if
that's what
I,
I was thinking.
if I was a poll worker and you were unable to, you needed to vote by mail or whatever, and I started questioning, well, who's going to do that? I mean, it's just not a workable thing. Of course, what they wanted to be able to do, the reason it was there in the first place, was more devious than that. They were going to wait till maybe they lost an election by a couple hundred votes. Then the AG was going to come investigate, say, 210 claims of disability, disallow those votes and win the election. See what I mean? I mean, that they weren't concerned about really challenging them during the election. They wanted to come back and disallow votes in races where they were close if they could scrap those ballots.
Yeah, and on the other hand, not even look at the ones where they won.
Correct. No, they wouldn't, of course.
His assault on the disabled lately is just phenomenal. The bill that was targeted at the gays and the disabled just recently. What was that bill? Well,
Are you talking about the most recent one was that trans kids can't participate in sports?
No, it
you're
was
referring to?
a bill. Gosh, now I can't even believe I brought it up. But it was one that would discriminate against LGBTQ and the disabled both at the same time. I'll find out later. But it's just I mean, it's not surprising either. But Abbott has supported more than one bill for that was anti-disabled, which I find fascinating. You know, I don't understand I don't understand how he can be okay with denying people rights. And what is the deal with these voter purges? Can you explain what that is and who should be looking out for that?
Sure. I'm going to take your first question first, if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, see, I think we've seen this happen in history. All right, it's like once in this case, uh, white, largely rural, but white males in power, put it that way. Once they begin using discrimination of any kind against even a single other as a tool towards power, there's no limiting how broad that discrimination gets. So, right, and you see it now. I mean, sure, the ongoing discrimination against women is extraordinary on the right, really, when you think about it. Uh, the discrimination with LGBT, it drives me crazy. In fact, I'm involved in some things involving Baylor University on that. It's sort of like it's like there's not enough others for them to get angry about, so they can prove the worth of their own white maleness.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so it doesn't end. I mean, it's like um, the Nazis started after gypsies and gays and women and everybody they could, and not just Jews, because by God, they had everybody challenged their own self,
Right. Mm-hmm.
right? So that's what's part of what's going on, and it's ugly to watch. Um, Now, your second question was on voter purges, and there's a lot of,
Yeah.
this is interesting. It's forgotten by many people that the Republican National Committee was under a federal court order from 1981 until 2018, when it finally got lifted by the judge that had the order died, and another judge lifted it. That order prohibited that sort of voter purge. And so one of the ways they would do it is they would send a letter to us, and if we didn't return the letter for whatever reason, like we didn't get the mail or we lost that piece of mail and it looked like, uh, you know, dumb mail we didn't need to look at. If you didn't send it back, you were purged from the voter rolls. It's called voter caging, right? And so Republicans would target who those mailings went to. Guess who? In the Northeast, to black voters, for instance. And a large percentage would come back undeliverable. And so they were knocked off the rolls, and no voter would know it until they went to vote. And when they'd go to vote, they'd give their registration card or their license or whatever, and the election worker would say, "You're not on the voter rolls anymore." And so the party did that. It got an injunction against them that lasted for decades, literally. But by now, it's Republican officials in government that are doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
Abbott and his Secretary of State, 2 or 3 years ago, got caught in the middle of it and quite embarrassed. They made the mistake of sending a very, very flawed list to local election officials who found the errors,
Mhm.
and they had to withdraw the whole effort. But they're back at it again. I mean, it's an old trick.
The
And
time
don't
of,
they,
go ahead, Mike.
okay, just really, I think I read somewhere at one point that they really think through the way too that they design the envelope. So it looks like junk mail, right?
Right.
It looks like junk mail. It doesn't look official or anything, which is totally evil, but yeah.
You've got it exactly right. That's what they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, the real problem with that process is even if the person does respond, they don't necessarily have to do anything with it. They just, leave them off the rolls. And when they show up, it's too late. You have no out there, so you don't vote. So
Right.
that is a very big weakness in the whole process.
Sure is. Yeah, totally.
So, and also, does this bill particularly target the what do you call them, provisional ballots or registering same day registration and that sort of thing? Because I've seen some things that are targeting the people who actually work there with fines and stuff.
Yeah, we don't have same day registration, Texas. Obviously, that would make it easier to vote, so they're not going to do it. And yes, they do have um, various provisions that make actions by election officials crimes. And there's some are so obscure and odd. I mean, one of those I mentioned earlier. One of those, if a poll watcher came in and started shoving a voter around, the law would appear to make it where the election worker could not de-escalate the situation in any way. Now, they may not get prosecuted ultimately if they intervened in an actual fight, but
Mhm.
technically speaking, they'd be violating the law as is proposed by the Republicans. And there's all other kinds of ones. One of the, it's nutty, and I'm not even sure how far it goes, though they try to limit the definition. Basically, they're saying if a ballot is involved or a ballot application, and you in any way stand to gain from your actions, and that is really broadly defined, like if you were a volunteer for a candidate, but you kind of expected if you did your job well and the candidate won that maybe you'd get a job, that would qualify you for prosecution if you, for instance, knocked on a door and gave somebody an application to vote by mail, or I think even just a sample ballot. Maybe it's limited, however, to an application for a ballot or an actual ballot. I'm a little unclear on that. Nonetheless, that's against the law now.
So
So
you can't, I can't volunteer for Kamala Harris at the next campaign and then also try to register people to vote down on South Congress.
I think they've made a yes, but it was kind of a fight. I think they have an exception now because they eliminated deputy voter registrars, which you would be because you get sworn in to register people to vote.
Right.
Initially, they took that out of the law. There would be no more of that. But that's back in, and that isn't under the provision I just described. All of it's just intended to create chaos. I don't. I mean, we all know who works these elections, by the way, and there are dedicated community people that want to help out. What they're trying to do is, of course, scare them off and create trouble at the polling places. I just don't think they're going to go arrest, you know, 200, 70-plus-year-olds who've been working the polling place
Well,
for years.
don't you think that the idea is to then install their own poll watchers or pollsters, um, who may not have any qualms with changing votes or
It could
throwing
be.
out.
It could be. It's a little hard to pull that off any systematic way because of the location of polling places, but it could be they would do the actual poll workers and they scared enough off. I think there'll be enough um, pushback and enough backlash on this. We may have more volunteers to work the polls than we've ever had because I think people are going to be very angry at what emerges from the legislature.
Well, one thing that you talk about chaos, the situation at the southern border has given Governor Abbott and his cronies a lot of ammunition against, the Biden administration. You can see, some of their point if you look at what's going on. But I've seen things on social media that are almost like the Russian interference in the elections, of where people in Central America are being given information by, not by, Biden, but by people circulating around saying, "Oh, it's free to get into the United States now." You think that is actually happening, or if it's just a matter of the absence of Trump told people, "Well, you can come on in"?
Well, the metaphor I use for this is that Donald Trump set the border on fire, and Abbott and others are complaining that he's not putting the fire out fast enough. And I don't know whether people are stirring up the victims of violence and abuse in Central America to say it's now an open border or whatever. I mean, wouldn't surprise me if smugglers weren't part of that. It wouldn't surprise me if Russia and other antagonists were posing as smugglers to do. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me too much. But I can understand a pent up demand. If I can sympathize, I can empathize with a mother or father in Central America whose children are in danger just by going out the door, or even at home, by saying we got to get out of this place, and they think there's been a change in administrations, they may try again. That's not so surprising to me, really, because I'd probably do it myself.
There's an unmet demand for workers here in Texas. I have friends I grew up with who are farmers and ranchers, contractors. And when Trump came into office, it became harder and harder for them to find labor. I mean, it's a sad fact that there are a lot of jobs that white entitled folks just don't want, and those were being filled by people, many of them undocumented. But it's just it's a tough situation, no matter which side you're on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't look, long ago, the messaging from Republicans is only to this base of they're not trying to persuade any of us any longer. So this may be an effective way for Abbott to communicate to the Fox News base, but he's not going to persuade anybody else. He doesn't think he may get challenged by anybody else on the other side of the aisle. But I mean, that's the sort of national story too. They're not trying to persuade people that aren't with them at all. They're trying to motivate a certain white nationalist crowd of voters who have hung with them before and during the Trump years.
We've distilled it to that now, and in a way it's sort of comforting because at least we know that's what it is. It's not all this other stuff. There it is. It's right out there. It's right, celebrated, and that makes it a little easier to challenge instead of this nebula.
It does.
Obfuscation and
definitely.
So do we think that Abbott can defeat Matthew McConaughey in the next gubernatorial election?
All right.
All right.
Left all left.
I don't think he's going to run. I mean, a lot of my friends really, I don't know, they were like turned off by the idea. I wasn't. I think I might have said this on Rag Radio. I'm sort of like into the chaos it could cause, like something to just disrupt the normal way of things going on around here. Might be fun to watch. But I don't think, I mean, it's true. None of us know what his political opinions really are in any depth whatsoever. And
I think he may lean to the right, actually.
What's that?
He may lean to the right. I don't think we can assume that he doesn't.
Although he was at the March for Our Lives.
No, it's true.
But, we haven't had a really good track record with movie stars and television stars getting into office. So,
What do you mean? What about the Reagan
buyer
years?
beware.
Well, I always heard that Schwarzenegger was a pretty good governor in California.
Oh, yeah. I was there. Nope.
Well, I don't think he's going to run, like I say. I mean, the truth is, in this era of Republican dominance here, we don't have a good track record with anybody in office. I mean, it's like statewide office. So I think he could be disruptive force and maybe open the door for somebody else, but I don't even think he'll do it. I don't know who's going to run for governor, to tell you the truth, but I don't think it'll be him.
Well, that's a good
What do you-
question. I mean, are there people who would really be good candidates here in Texas that we're aware of, that you're aware of?
Well, I know some. I mean, sure. I mean, the Castro brothers, either one of them could do it. I know what you're getting ready to say, Susie. Go ahead and say it.
Susie's going to run for governor.
Actually, I'd really like Cecile Richards to run.
Oh, well, she's
But-
an old friend. She
Yeah.
entertained that long ago,
I wish she would re-entertain it because that would be my most favorite. But of course, and now it's gone. Wendy
Davis.
Wendy could-
Davis.
Wendy
Yeah.
could run again, and a young
Well, she could
woman-
run again, but she had. It appears that she hasn't run very good campaigns. I would be concerned that would be the case again.
She should hire Glenn.
Well, that's a complicated story about a governor's race. It wasn't altogether her fault, but that's
Okay.
water under the bridge. Her congressional race against Chip Roy was actually, she did a great job raising money and she ran a pretty disciplined campaign. But that district is just hard one, and they had
Yeah.
put some of
my
those
district.
really high turnout conservative areas in the district over time, and
Mhm.
it was always
It's
going to be
like
a challenge.
78704 and then West Texas.
Yeah.
It is
With-
so unfair.
Thinking of Wendy Davis makes me think about Will Wynn. And,
Oh, I forgot about Will Wynn.
maybe he should run because his name sort of dictates the result.
Oh my God.
And it worked for him here in Austin. So,
Yeah,
Hey,
I don't have any idea where he is these days.
yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
heard
yeah,
anything out of
That's
him.
weird.
But anyway, I thought, Susie, that you were going to mention Lena Hidalgo, the county executive, the county
well,
judge in Harris County. And
of
course.
Also.
I am proud to say that she came to me before she decided what to run. She had gotten my name from George Lakoff, as a matter of fact, in
Wow.
early 2017. And I sort of mentored her through that race. I'm very proud of it. Now I've consulting to her and all the trials and tribulations she's been through with one emergency after another, including the pandemic and chemical fire after chemical fire and hurricane floods. And that's her job. She's the emergency director for Harris
Right.
County
So
as
how
the
can
county
she-
executive. She's
Yeah.
done a great job, but she's going to run for reelection, get one more term as county judge in the past before she decides on something else.
Hey, you mentioned Lakoff. What is Lakoff up to now? What has he been talking about?
He hasn't been as active as he once was, John. Gosh, he's fully retired from Berkeley, where I worked with him for a while, and he hasn't been as active on social media. I haven't talked to him in, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. He still holds forth from time to time, and I think he still gets some talks here and there, but he's not getting around like he once did.
I wonder what he thinks about the state of things now, or what he thought of Trump, especially.
Well, he was very active in the early days about Trump and trying to tell people to take Trump seriously, that there was a mad genius to the way he spoke, and it wasn't enough to just mock him or make fun of him. And he also kind of got behind the logic of the way Trump would frame things and said, you've got to take it seriously because it's going to be popular and you can't just, ridicule. One of those reasons is, of course, that it's easy then to get after us as elite snobs if we're ridiculing the sort of know-nothingism of Trump. And so they try to bait us into it.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me not to take that bait sometimes too. I have to say, sometimes
Boy,
this
me too.
extreme ignorant motivation of these things just overwhelms me. And
Stupidity has
speak when I
become
shouldn't.
very triggering.
what's that?
Stupidity has been quite triggering.
Yes, I'll say.
Well, yeah, and you have to realize that some really smart people are also pretty stupid. You know,
Exactly.
nobody's smart about everything.
That's, that's really
And a
true.
lot of them are willfully ignorant.
Well, Glenn, another thing that's really triggered the Republican administration here in Texas were the companies and organizations that said they're not going to participate in Texas if they pass, really repressive laws like the transgender bill, and that seems to be a big threat to them as they continue to really try to press these, really strange laws through, and getting pushback from big corporations and big organizations like the NCAA.
Well, this is a great development. You know, we saw it start with a bathroom bill back in 2017. 2017? Yeah, I guess it was. Man, time flies when
2017.
you're having
I
fun.
know.
And it was successful because they dropped that bill. That, by the way, was basically ordering Texas to what bathrooms they could use or not use, and very bathroom hall monitor kind of way, and particularly
Very
discriminated
Republican.
against transgender people. But one of the things that's going on when I mentioned that sort of like the growth and who they're discriminating against, one of the things to remember is they begin to discriminate against large percentages of the workers in these big corporations. So there's a lot of internal pressure in the corporations from their employees going, wait a minute, I work for you and I'm proud to be here, whatever it might be. But these laws are attacking me.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it? And there's another part to it, I think, um, which I think corporate leaders get is kind of interesting, and as part of this is that uh, regressive authoritarian laws are never really and have proved in history not to be good for an economy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and as part of this effort that you're speaking about, Scoop, they got Ray Perryman, who was once called by the New York Times the unofficial economist of Texas. He's a pretty moderate to conservative guy, by the way. Uh, he did a study on the economic effects of the voter suppression laws here. I'm not going to have the big number at hand right now, but basically he concluded it would cost the state of gross state product multiple billions of dollars between now and 2025 because basically lost wages, lost buying power, less retail sales, and of course the poor people are the ones most hurt because it's their lost wages that cause the bulk of the problem. But I think these business leaders get that in a sense that wait a minute, you can't begin a wholesale disenfranchising of a large segments of the population uh, and expect the economy to do as well as it was doing. They know that, and one reason that happens as soon as the population loses political power, they lose standing in the community, they lose access to education, healthcare, jobs, and that all follows into a big economic loss. So I think I praise these business leaders for speaking out. I hope there's more and more and more of them. I'm kind of disappointed, and I won't name those who we've asked who haven't yet because maybe they still will. But it's a really good development. It's a responsible actions they're taking.
Well, Republicans, are less concerned about you not voting for them. They're more concerned about you not contributing to them. That seems to be way more of a death blow to them.
Well, I don't think they're ever going to have. I don't know that these companies are going to let cut off their contributions. It may be that happens. Of course, the companies themselves in Texas can't give contributions. Corporate contributions, believe it or not, are still banned, but their executives can, and their executive spouses can, and their employees can. They may see a loss in employee-based PACs, however, if they keep this kind of stuff up. That's a fact.
I'm curious. I mean, many people have talked about it, but I'm curious to see what continues to develop. And it reminds me kind of when a blue norther comes in and it sucks that heat up from the Gulf as it swirls around. As I think about all those tax breaks to bring all these corporations in, and so you've got like the Samsungs and the Teslas and all that, and the employee base that's coming in, and they're not gonna, a lot of them are coming because they love the tax no sales tax or anyway, I can't talk tonight, but a lot of them have been living in these areas where it's a lot more progressive, and they're going to be coming into all the big cities, as you said. And so it's not just the people of color that are flooding into these urban areas. It's a whole new generation, a whole new political dynamic. And the one thing that gives me hope is that, they're scrambling to put all these laws into place, but it may be too late. What do you think about that?
No, I think you're onto something there. That's one of the reasons I'm really reasonably, modestly, a little bit optimistic about it's just what you say. It is true that some of these districts, for instance, are changing because of the in-migration of more progressive voters. I mean, I think that's certainly one of the reasons in our part of Texas, the Pflugerville, Round Rock area, Scoop, believe it or not, sooner or later, this is going to affect the Bastrop County area, I promise.
Oh, it already is. Housing
Like
prices
that,
are skyrocketing out here.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you're onto something there. I think that's true. And you're right. That's one of the reasons they're scrambling to get these barriers in place, and is sort of limit the ability for these people to make a difference. You know,
Mhm.
I think that's part of the plan.
Well, one of the conservatives' favorite thing here in Texas is to say, don't turn my Texas into California. But then they're trying to lure all these Californians
Right?
into Texas. It's like, make up your mind.
Yes.
It's turning out to be not that hard to lure them lately.
Mhm.
So I want to bring something up before we get too much later. So everybody, you just mentioned you said something about the storm that made me think of this, and that was the great electric grid collapse during the February freeze.
Snowbid.
And so I've been following the legislation on that, so-called legislation, so-called to deal with the whatever failed at the state level. None of the bills really do a darn thing, but there is one bill, and it's a real bill. I mean, in terms of a dollar cost, it's about to be dropped on the heads of Texans. And the legislators aren't talking about the amount.
Oh my God.
Estimates I'm hearing of what Texas taxpayers and consumers are going to have to pay is 100 billion with a B
Oh
dollars.
my God.
Wait a minute.
$100 billion for the revenue lost by companies because of the failures during the grid collapse.
Oh my God.
And how are those taxes to be assessed, if you will?
Well, what the plan is, and this bill came out of the House State Affairs Committee last night. It's called securitization. So what's going to happen is the state will put its credit behind the creation, behind another entity. I'm unclear what that's going to be. It could be ERCOT. It could be another nonprofit that's created. I'm not sure which. They will issue bonds in that amount. All right. Then the cost of those bonds will be repaid, say, over 30 years by consumers of electricity, basically.
Oh
And
my God.
when I say a tax, there will be a fee on your electric bill and maybe your natural gas bill to cover the cost of administering the whole program. So you'll not only have to pay back those which, by the way, keep in mind, first of all, some companies, by the way, the very large financial institutions that stand to gain from a bond program of that size, they ran off with this money in the first damn place. And it was companies that were assessed those suddenly high prices of electricity. So they bought from wholesalers who were stuck, and some would go broke, who don't have the money to cover the debt. And so these bonds are going to cover the debt. But everybody failed, from the companies involved through the regulators who had turned their backs on this problem for years. But once again, we're going to have to pay the price. And I'm waiting to see how Texans react to $100 billion bill being dropped on their heads.
Well, they said that it's all going to be okay now because they're going to be paying attention. But they had a power emergency, I believe it was on Tuesday, where they almost, they had to suggest to people to conserve electricity because they had, what was it, like 30 different generators that were down for maintenance. So
Oh my God.
obviously there aren't a lot of eyeballs on the problem yet.
Well, there's some speculation that it is true, apparently it is true, that some generators were down for maintenance in mid-April, which they sometimes schedule that, by the way, because usually the spring months are easy, but there's more speculation now that this was more like profit taking, because this is another metaphor I used to explain. So imagine if a fire department made more money the bigger the fire in your house. So you have a little fire and the fire truck rolls up, but they're sitting there going, well, if we wait an hour and the fire is really bad, we get paid more money. Well, that is how the electricity grid is structured here. The more difficult either the production, all right, because of whatever reason, frozen pipes or natural gas shortage or failed plants, the more difficult that is, the higher the price of production goes, the higher they can sell natural gas, for instance, and the higher everybody takes a profit. Just like my fire truck example. I mean, it is about as far from something a conservative would call a free market as it could possibly get. It's unbelievable, really.
Yeah, the free market, indeed. The free market went up to $9,000 for a few hours, apparently. So someone made some money there somewhere, and someone got billed for a lot of money elsewhere.
You got it, Scoop.
So, okay, so that, I mean, I didn't get billed some exorbitant amount of money first because I thought it was because I lost power for 3 days, and that's, oh, look at how much I saved. But then I found out it was with Austin Energy. They weren't beholden somehow to ERCOT. I mean, they are, but they aren't, because they told us that we're on a certain rate and we didn't enter to a private agreement with a private company.
Well, actually, there's something good about. I mean, Austin Energy. This is what happened to them, and they didn't lose any production, right? In the course of the freeze, they were able to keep producing electricity. They were ordered by ERCOT to do two things, though, all to the benefit of Austin Energy and ultimately us. And here's what they were ordered to do: shed their power load to their customers, meaning me and you. They had to turn off our lights. ERCOT, as members of ERCOT, they had to do what they were told. They were also told to sell their power on the grid because they were still able to produce power, right?
Oh man.
So they sold their power to the grid, so they didn't lose money, right? By the way, that's a good thing because they give a percentage to city general revenue fund, so that helps our budget woes in Austin. But that's why you didn't see some increase in your bill here, because of those two orders from ERCOT.
Well, my understanding was that the people who were seeing those huge bills were people who were in areas where there were competitive utility providers, and that they had contracts with those providers that specified that they would pay a cost for electricity that was based on the cost of electricity to the provider, so that when the cost of electricity shot way up during the storm, then their costs shot way up too. But that places like Austin, and I'm on Pedernales Electrical Co-op, we have the arrangement that we have with our power companies is that we charge we're charged a set rate. So I think that's part of the difference too. I don't claim to understand it completely, but
you have that right. There are people that have these, so I don't know if people know it. Some people have these retail electric companies that are nothing but a website, and they're just brokers, and they take a percentage of electricity sold to the customer, and that was part of the so-called deregulation in the 90s. And you're right, a lot of those have contracts that whatever charges those companies get for whatever reasons are passed immediately along to the customer, and it's in the contracts with the customer. And they are the ones that saw, like you said, there was one enormous, got a $13,000 bill for a month or something like that. That we, I'm not, they're not going to pay it. I mean, that's part of the reason you're going to see also a wave of bankruptcies in companies like that.
Yeah.
And it's part of the reason that there's a lot of these losses are going to have to come from somewhere else, because the Glenn Smith that got a $13,000 monthly bill cannot afford to pay that. The company that sold it to me is not going to have any customers pay that. That means it doesn't get paid to the people who provided the elect. So you can see it grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And that's what our $100 billion plus is going to cover.
What happens to the Glenn Smith who can't pay it? And I mean, are you then, do you declare bankruptcy? Do you have a ding on your
No,
credit?
well, there are moves in the legislature to make the ding on the credit not happen. And they're going to provide new, they're going to direct you to a new company so that you don't lose electricity either. And you're not going to have to come up with the money. There's almost no way a politician was ever going to do that, frankly. I don't give them too much credit for doing it, because, you know, they weren't going to turn their backs on that kind of debacle, but they're going to restore the money. All of us now, through this program, this bond program, are going to restore the losses for that to the companies upstream, you know, way upstream.
Always. Yeah.
Yep.
So I heard that they did not choose to winterize for stuff for the next time this happens. Did I hear that right?
Well, you know, what's they're being told to winterize, but that's another, could add to this cost, by the way. Nobody knows exactly how that's going to get paid for. It's a very costly proposition. That's another thing going on. So let me just say, who knows whether they're actually going to winterize, or whether they're going to make some other kind of provisions to, like, backup facilities or whatever. But that's something going on with these plants. I mentioned how Judge Hidalgo in Harris County had to cope with all these chemical fires. One of the things going on with these plants in Texas, because it's such a freewheeling, you know, unregulated place,
Mhm.
is they're not updating their equipment anywhere. So the safety things in the chemical plants on the ship channel are been there for 25 years and aren't updated. And because they haven't been forced, they have been inspected and forced to update. And it's the same with some electricity providers and natural gas providers, and they're old. And there's going to be more and more and more of this, because nobody here is requiring them to update across
Oh
industry.
my God.
And this is the deregulation ushered in by Rick Perry.
No, it started before then, I'm afraid, but it's a, you know, so I mean, it started with the effort in the '60s to elect Ronald Reagan, and it started with Reagan and led to the state. It's a long-term thing Republicans have fought for.
Let's not forget about
I've got
Enron.
I've got Reagan taking advantage of Lady Liberty on the back wall there, Ralph Steadman.
Oh.
Oh, that's hilarious. That is one thing about those plants too, is in their in their income filings, and they're depreciated out, of course, because they've been there so long, but they're also like so valueless. They admit to their valueless in terms of local property taxes, right? Valuelessness. They just own up to it. Oh, this old plant's so old and beat up. You can't raise our property taxes. At the same time, people are relying on the safety of those plants to save their health and lives. It's a sick situation.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's really, and it's, what do you think? Okay, so Biden, I know we just have a few minutes, but Biden just, he appointed someone new to the EPA, is that right? I can't remember the guy's name though.
Yes, and I'm escaping me at the moment too, but he did. But why don't we talk generally about Biden? Really, I mean, he's
Okay.
like he is kicking the doors down. He is doing an extraordinary job, in my opinion, on all fronts. And there are some serious writers covering this and are already comparing him to FDR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's moving faster than FDR did, frankly.
yeah.
So I'd like to end on an encouraging note here that I mean, I think they're gonna pass the infrastructure bill, and I think they're gonna come around on the voting rights bill too. And if just those things happen, with the rescue bill already out there with a few $1 trillion to help us all get through the rest of the pandemic, infrastructure and voting rights, I mean, that alone is, I didn't dream that was possible
Yeah.
4 years ago. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I find myself hoping that if Biden really manages to do all the things he's trying to do, that people will be so impressed and so actually empowered by what he's done that the Democratic Party will um, gain some power thereby. I don't think Biden's going to run again. He kind of said that he would only run for one term, but hopefully we can hold on to. I mean, I'm not really. I don't know if I'm a Democrat or not, but
Biden could be like the bridge. That would be amazing, you know.
Great uniter.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Bridge to the future.
Mm-hmm.
Glenn,
We're
thanks
actually
so
out of
much for
time,
being
folks.
here. Yeah, thank you so much, Glenn. I really
Thanks,
appreciate
man.
you coming by. It was fun.
We'll have to have you back.
I love being with you all. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.